"If you fix this engine, I'll marry you," laughed the female CEO. Then the humble black mechanic did. They say pride comes before a fall, but arrogance? That often comes crashing down in the most unexpected of ways. Imagine a woman at the top of the corporate ladder, wealthy, powerful, feared by employees who dared to cross her. She had it all, or so she thought. But one broken-down car on a lonely stretch of highway, and one mechanic she thought beneath her, would change everything. With a mocking laugh, she made a promise she never thought she'd have to keep. "If you fix this engine, I'll marry you." But when the smoke cleared, it wasn't her car that needed saving, it was her soul. Samantha Caldwell was the name everyone whispered in corporate boardrooms. She was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech firm, celebrated for her sharp mind and ruthless efficiency. But behind the admiration lurked fear. She was known to humiliate employees, dismiss contractors without a second glance, and scoff at anyone she deemed beneath her. For Samantha, respect was reserved only for those who carried wealth and influence equal to her own. On a warm summer afternoon, Samantha's luxury sports car broke down just outside a small town. She cursed under her breath, her stilettos tapping impatiently on the asphalt. To her dismay, the only help nearby came from a modest repair shop, faded paint on the sign, a humble garage that smelled of oil and sweat. The man who stepped out to greet her was Marcus Johnson. A tall, broad-shouldered black man in worn denim and grease-stained boots. Marcus had run the shop for years. Known in town as hard-working, dependable, and kind, he was the very opposite of everything Samantha respected. Rolling her eyes, she scoffed at the idea that someone like him could ever touch her luxury car. In a moment of arrogant mockery, she laughed and sneered, "If you fix this engine, I'll marry you." The words, meant as a cruel joke, would soon take on a weight Samantha could never have imagined. Marcus didn't flinch at her insult. He'd heard worse in his life, being underestimated, belittled, and judged not just for his modest profession, but for the color of his skin. Still, he calmly lifted the hood of her car, his practiced hands moving with quiet confidence. Samantha watched with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. How could a man with grease under his fingernails possibly understand the complex engineering of a high-end sports car? Yet, as minutes stretched into hours, she began to notice the precision of his movements, the patience with which he diagnosed the issue, and the quiet intelligence in his eyes. But Samantha wasn't ready to let her pride crumble. She called friends, colleagues, even roadside assistants, demanding someone more qualified to save her. But when told it would take hours for anyone else to arrive, her impatience grew. Marcus, on the other hand, stayed calm, unbothered by her cold remarks, focused only on the work before him. As he tinkered with the engine, their conversations, though brief, revealed glimpses of a man with dreams beyond his garage. Marcus had studied engineering but lacked the connections and financial backing to climb higher. Instead, he built a life of service in his community, fixing cars for fair prices, sometimes free for those in need. He was respected not for his wealth, but for his character. Samantha scoffed at his choices, unable to understand why someone so capable would settle for such a life. Yet the longer she was stranded, the more her irritation was replaced by a strange, unwelcome respect. When Marcus finally tightened the last bolt and closed the hood, he wiped his hands on a rag and stepped back. The car roared to life under his touch. And with that rumbling engine came the echo of her careless words. "If you fix this engine, I'll marry you." Samantha stood frozen, her arrogance suddenly turning into something else. Fear. The townsfolk who had gathered around chuckled, whispering about the CEO's promise. It had been nothing more than a cruel joke, but now, in front of witnesses, it carried weight. Marcus didn't demand her hand in marriage. Instead, he looked at her calmly, with the quiet dignity of a man who didn't need her approval. "Don't worry," he said softly. "I'm not interested in promises born out of mockery." But his words struck her harder than if he had demanded she keep her vow. For the first time in her life, Samantha realized she had encountered someone she couldn't control, someone whose worth was so deeply rooted that no amount of money, power, or ridicule could shake it. Driving away in her repaired car, Samantha couldn't silence the echo of his voice, the steadiness in his gaze. For days, she replayed the moment in her mind. A man she had deemed unworthy had proven himself in ways her wealthy peers never had, through humility, skill, and integrity. And it haunted her. Weeks later, Samantha found herself back at Marcus's garage. This time, her car wasn't broken. She came with an uneasy humility she had never known before. She admitted she had been cruel, dismissive, and wrong. For once, she sought not to command, but to listen. Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't lecture her. Instead, he spoke of how respect and dignity weren't tied to titles or wealth. He lived by a principle Samantha had never considered, that true power lay in lifting others, not in tearing them down. That day marked a turning point for Samantha. Though she would never undo the years of arrogance behind her, she began to change. She offered scholarships for underprivileged youth in engineering. She treated her employees with newfound fairness. And though she never truly married Marcus, his quiet strength left a permanent mark on her life. For viewers, this story isn't about a CEO's empty promise. It's about a lesson we often forget. Greatness isn't defined by wealth, titles, or status, but by character, integrity, and the respect we show others. So ask yourself, when you look at the people around you, do you see their worth, or do you measure them by society's shallow standards? Because sometimes, the very people we dismiss as beneath us, are the ones who carry the wisdom we need most.